321 Central traffic stop.
21.
I'll be on East Green, right outside Henry County, 911 dispatch.
321 status.
Hello viewers, my name is Yasser Bashir and I'm a commander with the Houston Police Department, and along with me is Sergeant Yusuf with the Houston Police Department as well. So how are you doing today?
Good, how about you?
I'm doing great.
That's
First, I just want to say last week we did a show on internet safety for our children, and we got really good positive feedback.
We did.
And, as we discussed that this week we should continue on
Yes.
with that topic, but now let's focus on the adults.
Yeah, it's a very delicate topic. We want to cover not just the child side, but also the adult side, because as you and I have seen throughout our career, it's a unfortunate but very frequent event that happens. Far more frequently than people generally realize, and it makes society uncomfortable. It's sort of a taboo. People don't like talking about it, but we have to talk about it. We have to bring awareness to it. We need to be able to identify these things in our daily life so that we can reduce, if not completely eliminate this from happening every single day.
Right.
But before we get into that, let's go ahead and watch a little video, and then we'll pick up from there.
That sounds good. All right, welcome back, viewers. Now we're going to go ahead and start with our presentation about rape and sexual assault. Sometimes these words are used interchangeably.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's start. Let's talk about the video first.
Yeah, so
briefly.
You see how in the video you've got an attractive female and an attractive male. They find a certain chemistry, and then once the chemistry develops, it just goes into a separate direction, a direction that the female victim didn't see, a direction that most of us wouldn't even catch in the first 10 or 15 seconds of the video, not even looking at it, thinking from that standpoint that something so innocent can develop into something so heinous.
Right.
So that's something that we need to keep in mind.
Yes. The one thing was, many of us were in that position. I guess that's how we found our
significant
other, and
absolutely.
And I think it's normal interaction. But toward the end, when the person wanted to have sex with the person, but she was not ready. She did not consent.
Exactly.
So that's when it becomes a crime.
Yeah,
it's normal for people to have interaction with each other, but it's not normal to forcibly commit a sexual act.
Yeah, and as we'll go through the program, we'll talk more about consent, but the viewers will hear us say this word a whole lot more. Consent is the basis of any sort of contact. It doesn't have to be sexual, but any sort of contact. Even when you're about to shake hands with somebody, you know you can extend your hand, the other person will grab it, or if somebody extends their hand, you grab it, and it's just, that's very basic. Handshake is one of the very most basic actions that we take every day, but even that requires some sort of consent. You're not going to force yourself. You're not going to just walk up to somebody, grab their hand just to be like that. So when it comes to something far greater as body contact in an intimate setting, in an intimate way, there has to be consent. Yes. It's just that is the building block of any relationship in what way soever.
Because the person is willingly want to engage in that relationship.
Yeah.
But before we do talk about rape and sexual assault, I do have a disclaimer I want to mention to all the wonderful viewers, is that this topic is very difficult. And we are going to say some things. We talk about sex and things like that, which some of you may not be feel comfortable with it, but it's just something we need to let it out.
Yeah, it's just like last week when we did the internet safety thing. Some of the terminology that we use, some of the things that we talk about, some of the events that we personally have come across that we discover, those are events that even for us, we were not comfortable, but as police officers, we have that calling where we have to respond to those incidents, and then We want to make sure that our viewers are aware of those.
And the second thing I just want to mention to the viewers and to you as well is we have a lot of information and we may not get through that.
Yeah.
There are some aspects of sexual assault we may not be able to cover.
Yeah.
But we are going to go and explain much as we possibly can
Absolutely.
with the limited time we have.
And as always, we're always available. If you want to reach us out, we're at the Midwest station. So if you want to get with us about more, we can always add to the information that we have, but we're going to try to cover it.
So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and let's start with the law. What is the law states? I'll explain the law, and then you go ahead and explain more into details about the consent.
Yeah,
why
absolutely.
consent is so vital to sexual assault cases.
Yeah.
Every state has a different law, but I believe the verbiage is almost the same.
Absolutely.
But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about or explain the Texas law when it comes to sexual assault and what is the law states. The law states that a person commits an offense, of sexual assault, if the person intentionally or knowingly, that's the first thing that we have to prove, causes the penetration of the anus or sexual organ of another person by any means. Like any means could be your fingers. We may have seen that incidents at a bus stop or in a train station, subway, where individual would touch another person improperly without the person's consent. And that's something you're going to talk about more. So in a nutshell, this is what, it goes into more details, but in a nutshell, that's what it is. The person knowingly, intentionally penetrates the person's private area, but by any means.
By any means whatsoever.
And the person did not give consent.
Now, as we talked a few minutes ago, consent is the most important part. As you can see, it's very well within the law. It even tells you that you don't have to be able to give consent. That's one of the most important things that people don't understand is that, hey, if I don't ask, that automatically means yes. And I know viewers have heard this. Pretty much everybody's heard it. No means no.
No.
And we'll get into it later down the road. But no means no. And if you go into the same law and you look at what they talk about consent in a general basis could be anything. You could be threatening a person by blackmailing them. That doesn't mean you got their consent just because they said yes. Person could be unconscious. And that means that's another issue. If they're unconscious, does not mean that that is an open invitation to do whatever you want with them. They could be mentally ill, because we know that people that are mentally ill often are not in the right state of mind to make the proper decision to be able to grant those authorities that they have, even over themselves. So you can't use a mentally ill person and say, hey, they're mentally ill, but they said yes, because they may not even know what they're consenting to. So that's something that's very important. You can also not do force, which means any type of force. You can't put a knife or a gun to somebody's head, or even just tell them, hey, if you don't do this, I'm going to hurt you. Or even coerce them by saying, hey, if you don't do this, I'm going to hurt your family. It could be your parents, your siblings, or even your spouse. That, hey, if you don't consent to what I'm asking, then I'm going to go ahead and hurt those people. That's coercion. You cannot do that as well, because you can push that person into doing something that they don't want to. And the same thing even applies. The law even talks about public servants.
Yes.
Not just police officers, but we're talking about first responders. We're talking about people in positions of power. They cannot even offer you something like, hey, I will do such and such thing for you, or I will say, a very basic one that I came across was a building permit issue, where the person said, hey, if you don't consent, I'm not going to pass your building permit. That is still a sexual assault, just because you're trying to get something done and you don't see another way out of it. And we'll further talk about that when we go on. But that's another thing. Then a very common thing that we see these days is a health provider. We have people that take care of the elderly, or people that take care of others who are not physically well. You cannot take advantage of such a person that is an elder or not physically well as your medical service provider.
Do you remember recently there was a case that made the news where this one female, she was in a coma for so many years. She ended up getting pregnant.
She ended up getting pregnant, and she had a kid, and that was a very big case that made it. They actually were able to get the person's DNA from the child itself, and were able to find out that it was a person that was working at the location, and that was not an isolated case. That was just one of the cases. He got caught because of that, but that was happening quite a lot with this one person. So you've got all of these.
And we also have one more that that you didn't mention, was about the date
rape drug. And that, unfortunately, I've had firsthand contact where I had to chase a suspect that had about almost 30, it's been a while, it's been about 2 or 3 years. No, actually, it's been more longer than that. But I had a vial that he had full of just clear liquid. It had no smell. It had no indication of what it was. I wouldn't have known until the suspect himself told us what it was. It was rohypnol, and then we ended up getting a lab test, and we found out that it's rohypnol. And according to what the lab told me, it had about 3,000 doses.
Because I remember one incident like that where I had to go pick up a sexual assault kit at a hospital, and I became aware that there were two females. The last thing they remember is going to the bathroom at a restaurant or a club.
Yeah.
And next thing they remember is they woke up naked in a vacant apartment, and they were sexually assaulted.
Yeah, absolutely. And this happens quite often. And that's what brings us to the next part of this. Is now that we've gotten through an idea of consent, we've gotten through what the law is, some of our viewers may be wondering, well, how does this affect us?
Yes, exactly.
Well, here's the thing. It affects everybody. Here in America, every 92 seconds, according to studies that we have seen, a person is sexually assaulted every 92 seconds. So we don't know when those 92 seconds are up. They could be up right now. They could be up in the next 92 seconds. America is actually, and with those 92 seconds, according to recent studies, the United States is actually one of the countries that has one of the lowest rates. We have countries out there that have much higher rates than this. So you can think of it saying that it could be less than 92 seconds that a person is being victimized of such a heinous crime. It says that we've got other stats, like 1 in every 6 women at some point will become a target of sexual assault. It may not be completed, but they will become a target of it. Because when the one thing that we didn't talk about in the law section real quick was that it doesn't mean that the sex act has to be completed.
Yes.
It can be an intention. And as we get through the program, we'll talk about what intention means, but it can just be an act, it can just be a try. They're just trying. And it's still considered a problem. CPS themselves have said that over 63,000 children a year are victims of sexual assault, and that's a big number.
The crime, also, I read another research is that a college student is more likely to get sexually assaulted than get robbed. And as you know, robbery is the most prevalent type of violent crime.
Especially in Houston, unfortunately, it's one of the most prevalent crimes. But
for a woman, I'm not just talking about Houston, but in general. They're very at high risk. They're not high risk, but they're more likely to get sexually assaulted.
When we were discussing about this topic, I had watched a documentary actually a little while back, and it's one of the streaming services, and it actually showed that it does a very thorough investigation of how colleges are considered targeting grounds, hunting grounds for people to commit something like this. Which the last thing you're thinking about when you're going to college is that, hey, I'm going to get sexually assaulted. Or robbed, or anything's going to happen to me. You're going there for an education because you want to be a productive member of society after you're done with this. You have your own hopes and dreams. Only to have something like this being prevalent in colleges. In fact, colleges now have police officers on site. They have their own ways of investigating these issues and catching the perpetrators. We'll get into this later. Now, how does this affect us as law enforcement officers?
Let me answer that one.
Yeah, so that's one.
Now, this is something I never heard of. How serious the problem was sexual assault is because we already know in our profession we have issue of underreporting of crimes.
Absolutely, in every crime, man.
Yes, underreporting, but I was not aware that 3/4 of sexual assault cases are never reported. That means, that's significant amount of numbers of cases that females have been victimized. And the perpetrator has not been caught, and he got away with the crime.
Let's reverse that and say, so let's make it even easier. Is one in out of 4 crimes, only 1 will be reported to us.
Yes.
And that's less than 25%. So and that's pretty bad for when it comes to statistics. You as a commander, you work on the statistical part of it.
Because what we do is we look at the cases and we look for patterns, we look for crime trends. We look for data so that way we can put our patrol officers and investigators to target that specific crime. In sexual assault cases, if the crime is not reported, that means we're not utilizing our resources as we should.
And there's a study that we looked at while we were preparing for this that says that, hey, out of the people that did not report those crimes, 30% of them said they didn't even give a reason. They just didn't want to report it. 30% of the people didn't even want to repeat it. 20% were worried that they would get retaliated again, and that's really big. That is really big, where people are like, "Hey, I'm worried about retaliation." And then there's a significant number. 13% felt that the police could or would not do anything, and I don't know how people come to that equation.
We'll talk about that.
We'll discuss it.
People have many different reasons why they don't want to report crime. One could be they don't think that we'll catch the person, but
Yeah.
but we do catch them.
Yeah, absolutely.
There could be other reasons, the stigma or the trauma, the stigma from the society. Nobody will believe me.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that people don't think about them. Well, something like this happens. The one thing that we've noticed is the victim is so worried about the outside that they forget to worry about themselves, and that's something we see a lot.
So why don't you hold that thought, and we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to watch a video, and then we'll continue on with our presentation. Thank you.
321 Central traffic stop.
21.
I'll be on East Green, right outside Henry County, 911 dispatch.
321 status.
321 Central traffic stop.
21.
I'll be on East Green, right outside Henry County, 911 dispatch.
321 status.
Welcome back, viewers. We will continue on our topic of sexual assaults and rapes. But first, before we do that, the whole case of sexual assaults is based on consent. So in case you may not have understood us clearly, so what we're going to do is we have a quick video for you to watch, and after that, we'll continue on with the presentation.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they go, "Oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you." Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you can make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware that they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important bit, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you're entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say, "No thank you," then don't make them tea. At all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, "Yes, please, that's kind of you." And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind, and you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they are unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea, and they can't answer the question, "Do you want tea?" because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea, and they said yes, but in the time it took you to boil the kettle or brew the tea and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down, make sure the unconscious person is safe, and this is the important part again, don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they are safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it, going, "But you wanted tea last week," or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, "But you wanted tea last night." If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you are able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to make myself a cup of tea.
All right, welcome back, viewers. I hope you understand the main point that the video was trying to make, and that was about consent. Basically, no means no.
And very simply,
no means no.
I know that the video was a little cartoony. Yeah. It was kind of it was taking away from the soberness of the end, and I understand that the topic is difficult, but that is actually a video that has been used by a lot of law enforcement agencies as a training element. So that we can use it, because when it comes to sexual assaults, as we'll get into investigations, we don't try to overcomplicate things. We try to make them simple, just like that video does. Is it tells you very simply, no means no, and that's what we go with.
So let's continue on with why the victims failed to make a report. What were some of the reasons they don't want to report it?
Like we were talking beforehand, and it's quite unfortunate, but in my time as a police officer, I have seen this quite a lot, especially in our community. In the Desi community, is that people tend to let the outside elements come up to them too much. Sometimes we've had victims that have told us, hey, my family told me not to report it, okay? We've had another one where the victim said, hey, I felt so ashamed of myself. And that's not, that. As we get through that, we'll talk about that, but you shouldn't be ashamed of something that's not your fault. Right. And we actually had one victim that said, I thought it was my fault. Because of my clothing. We had to get over that. That was a difficult one because the person just kept thinking, no, it was me. It was my fault. It was my fault. It's not the other person's fault. And we had to explain to them, no, that's not the case. The case is it's somebody else's fault. Somebody took advantage of it because we live in a free society. Yeah. We should be able to talk, dress, walk, live the way we want to. Yeah. But people generally forget that. People think that we're so dependent on the others, and it's harsh.
I mean, it's very difficult to talk about this crime. It's very heinous crime because we have victims, young as 3-year-old, and all the way to elderly female, 99 years old. So it can happen to anybody. And then there's another thing that we've heard from a lot of people, as I discussed, that 13% of people that the study looked at thought the police could or would not do anything. Yeah, and then there's a significant number out of them said they felt that even if they told the police that nothing would happen to that person because the person had some sort of power, that person was too good at what they did, but the thing is, at the end of the day, you do have to tell us so that we can work the case. Like you said, hey, we will build our case around consent, we do all this stuff, we'll get into that. So you've got these different things in there going on at the same time
that people are so worried about that they, like I said before the break, was they forget about themselves. And the thing is, when a crime happens to you, it's about you.
So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on who are these perpetrators. Yeah. Are they the same type of individuals that we talked about our last episode on the internet? They're luring females. No, these are more hands-on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the chances of a victim knowing the perpetrator is 8 out of 10. So most likely she or he is going to know the person who's going to rape him or her. Yeah. For example, 39% of the sexual assaults are committed by an acquaintance. 33% are either a current or former boyfriend. And then 19% are committed by strangers. Yeah. So the significant numbers is someone you know. It could be your neighbor, your ex-boyfriend, family member. The list goes on and on. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about this perpetrator is this is not the first time doing it. And,
absolutely.
And they tend to have criminal history. Yeah. They've been convicted before, and honestly, they're not going to stop. Yeah. And as we watched our first video, that guy seemed like very loving, caring.
Absolutely. And you don't see guys with ski masks on running through the back alleys trying to kidnap women. That element is still there in this society, but that element has gone down. It is quite unfortunate, but for us, especially when our Special Victims Unit is investigating crimes in clubs, they're not caused by people who you could look at and say, hey, that's a criminal. Yeah. They're caused by people who are dressed properly, who are looking like a normal person, looking like you or me. And it's unfortunate, but they go down this dark path. They decide that they are going to go ahead. And when it comes to rape or sexual assault, it doesn't matter what terminology you use, it's a crime of power. The person is trying to use power as an element on their victim. A lot of people, and we've seen this in victims, and we've seen this in society, they have a mindset that sexual assault or rape is all about sex. It's all about intimacy or anything like that. When that's the case, but that's one of the elements, but that's not the primary element. Most rapists, sexual assault predators, they are serial criminals. They're not, like you said, they haven't done it the first time. That's not likely the first time. You may not be the first victim. There might be other victims in the same line, and that happens quite a lot where we're not able to charge person for one crime, but we link that person to so many others that we're able to rope in the remaining crime and bring it in there too as an element, showing that, hey, look, this person, they do it all the time. Another thing that we have on this whole thing is, so let's talk about how the prosecutors see it. So we've got prosecutors, and then we had another study that we looked at where there were 1,000 suspected rape criminals. They said that out of those 370, that's 37% if you look at it from a 100 standpoint, there are 370 of them had one prior felony conviction, and actually out of those 370, 100 already had 5. So you've got this small number of people that already have a felony conviction, and then you've got one that have repeated felony convictions. Then another issue is that they will get released. Rape is a crime that does not carry capital punishment. So in that case, they will get released back into society. They have to register as a sex offender. But we have seen in our line of work that registry, it helps us track them, but it rarely stops them from doing it again.
The other thing I want to mention was about reporting, how important it is, because a victim may feel like, okay, I was raped a year ago, okay, the time has passed, so now I cannot make a report. Unfortunately, that's not true. Every crime, there's a statute of limitation. Now, depending on your state, in the state of Texas, sexual assaults, depending on the type of the sexual assault, you have up to 5 years from the date of the crime to prosecute the suspect. However, if you're a minor, under age 17 or under, let's say, for example, a person is 17 and gets sexually assaulted. Now, statute of limitation will not start until the person turns 18.
So it extends
for 20 more years. And why do they do that? Because we know in some organizations, institutions, young children have been sexually assaulted. So they don't bring out the allegations or
until later
in their life. So now when they turn 18, technically they have 28 and 30 until they turn 38 for the law enforcement agency to work that case and prosecute the.
And since you bring that up, as the reason for the statute of limitations actually do help law enforcement, because when we get into DNA testing doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen tomorrow or the day after. DNA testing it takes time. We want to make sure that we want to be absolutely sure that the case that we build against that person, the DNA is an exact match. So even if the case has weaknesses, the DNA is evidence that cannot be omitted. It's concrete, and that takes time. That can take a year to 2 years. And as we talk about victims later on, we'll discuss about how it's a lengthy process. It's not like a robbery crime. It's not like murder. It cannot be solved in 1 hour, 2 hours, a week, a month. It can take years before we are able to concretely put.
So let me go ahead and just do a brief summary. What we have talked about. We have talked about sexual assault. We talked about consent, the law, how severe the problem is, why victims they choose not to report the crime. But now let's take it one step further. Okay, now how to protect yourself from if you were from becoming a victim. One thing is, make sure you have situational awareness. Okay, because there are some people out there that actually will take advantage of you and come up with different scams to get your attention, to lure you in. For example, some of the simple things you can do is make sure your gas is always full, and don't fall for the scam when the car pulls next to you and while you're driving, hey, you have a flat tire, pull over. Don't do that. We all have cell phones. Call the police. If you're at the,
if you feel like, hey, I'm being followed. Go to your nearest police station. We all have a cell phone. We can Google that and find it in 2 seconds, or go to a gas station and ask people for help. A velvet gas station.
One more thing is, if you're at a club drinking, do not leave your drink unattended.
Absolutely. That's actually one of the things that I'm glad you brought that up, because that has been a reason that we've seen in our line of work is, hey, people leave their drinks unattended. It is very easy to spike, is the term, to spike a drink that has been left unattended. And one thing that people don't understand is, sexual assault or rape is not just a crime of opportunity. When I say a crime of opportunity, that does not mean that, hey, there was an opportunity, you went ahead and you took that opportunity to commit that crime, like robbery or stealing a car. The car is running, you jump in the car, you take off. That's an opportunity crime right there, because you had it right in front of you. It was just presented. Rape and sexual assault, people that are career criminals, they build up to it. You don't even know if you might be getting stalked. The person might have looked up your social media profiles. They might have your email. They might have your LinkedIn accounts. They might have a whole graph of your. And these days we have websites where you can put a person's name in, and there's millions of them. You can put a person's name in, and it just puts everything out of the regular data that's available to the public. So a person may already know you, and you may not even have an idea that the person standing next to you has already picked you, has already targeted you, already knows what's going on with you. So you have to be very aware. And like you said, situational awareness, it happens to all of us. All of us are walking up and down the street or walking inside our house with our phone, with our heads down looking at the phone. When you're doing that, you're taking it away from your own protection. We're living in a world where we're giving away too much info.
Let's change let's shift the attention to now. This is where it gets difficult for us to explain this.
Yeah.
Let's say now you are attacked. What do you do? And I would say it depends on the person's physical capacity, their mental state of mind, if they're willing to fight, or they want to give up. But some of these are just suggestions.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
At the end,
We're
it's
going
to
to
depend on you.
Yeah.
For example, if you do decide to fight, okay, make sure you make it count.
Yeah.
If you're gonna attack, scratch him, because that way you can get some of the DNA under your nails.
Yeah.
Bite, poking, jabbing, knee kicking.
Yeah.
But if he does use a weapon, then perhaps the best option may be to comply.
Yeah.
But gather as much evidence as you can.
Yeah. The thing is, it is your life at the end of the day. You must fight to protect it. Okay. In a case of sexual assault, a lot of times the cases are solved from the DNA that you may have grabbed when you fight back. You have to understand that when it comes to sexual, criminals that commit such acts, they are violent. Last week we talked about criminals that were not. This week we're talking about criminals that are very, very violent, because at that point it's all about power. So if you push them back and confuse their power, they will go back. But that doesn't help the case. We want to be able to get them. You can get anything, even if a piece of clothing. If we have it, then we're able to do
The other thing
with
is, the myth I want to take people to remember is, just because you're sexually assaulted, there may not be any injuries, because the person can use a weapon and force himself upon you. But we're gonna come back after a break. We're gonna talk more about, okay, now you've been through this traumatizing event. Okay, what are some of the experiences you may feel? At the same time, what to do after that?
Yeah.
We'll be back in a minute. We'll take a short break.
321 Central traffic stop.
21.
I'll be on East Green, right outside Henry County. 911 dispatch.
321 status.
321 Central traffic stop.
21.
I'll be on East Green, right outside Henry County. 911 dispatch.
321 status.
Welcome back, reviewers. We will continue on talking about sexual assault. So far, we talked about the law, the elements of sexual assault. We talked about consent. We also talked about the statistics, why this crime is so underreported, and what we all can do about it. But now we're going to continue on. Let's talk about, once you become a victim, what can you do?
So, as we had discussed already, hey, 1 in every 6 women in the U.S. at some point is going to get targeted, according to the study that we have. Okay, it's very important to know what happens when you become the victim of a crime. We've talked about in previous episodes about robberies. We've talked about druggings. We've talked about all these things. Sexual assault, it is a very difficult topic, but we do have to discuss what happens should you become a victim in this case. The first thing that you need to do is you need to immediately call the police. Call us so that we can come and make contact with you. Our officers, especially here at the Houston Police Department, are very well trained to be able to handle such a situation and try to get the process going, and then we'll get our detectives out there to you immediately. And by immediately, I mean that, hey, we're going to have officers that are probably going to make a few calls and try to see if we can get somebody out there to come talk to you right then and there. Now, that's a double-edged sword, because recent studies have found that when you become a victim of a crime, if it's violent, you're probably not going to remember all the details immediately afterwards, but you will actually start getting those details once your body calms down, and that may happen 3 or 4 days later. You might get more details coming out of your mind than you did at that time, but you must call us. You need to let us know. When it comes to being a sexual assault victim, please, if God forbid you do become a victim, don't take a bath, don't change your clothes. We need them. We need both of those things, because they are now objects of crime. Okay, pretty much. It's unfortunate to say, but at that point, your human body itself is the scene of crime, and the only way we can help you and charge the person that has committed this heinous act is through gathering all that evidence. So we need your clothes so that we can get some DNA off of it. If you still have access to the scene of the crime, don't disturb it. Just leave it alone. Give us a call so that our officers can go out there, secure the scene, and try to gather as much evidence as we can. We do have crime scene investigators that can actually, if they're not busy, will come out and actually do that. Otherwise, our officers are well trained to take care of that stuff. Another thing you can do is you can go to the hospital and you can do a rape kit. Now, as you had mentioned earlier, a lot of people feel they don't want to report the crime.
Right.
And again, whatever thing that is pushing you to not report the crime, still go and do a rape kit at any hospital. All the major hospitals throughout the country carry rape kits. When I talk about rape kits, we're talking about swabbing. We're not talking about anything intensive. All they're trying to do is gather cell data, DNA that can be preserved. Because as we talked about statute of limitations, what if a year later you want to report the crime? At that time, we can go back, get that rape kit because it's been sealed, and still get the DNA off it, because the DNA doesn't lie. That's a very old terminology.
The other thing about the rape kit is that they're not just gathering evidence, but they're also trying to protect you from STD, sexually transmitted diseases,
absolutely,
HIV, and also unwanted pregnancy. So they're also going to take everything. They don't not take everything, but they're all going to do everything they can to make sure that you're
absolutely
safe.
Now, another thing that the viewers need to be understanding in this case is that we as police officers have a job to ask questions. Unfortunately, our questions are not always very simplistic, but they're very direct. That's, as I mentioned earlier, we do try to keep it simple, but simple for us defined is straightforward answering, straightforward fact gathering. And sometimes we ask questions, it's not that we're trying to think if the victim's lying or we're insensitive to what just happened to you, but that's a specific line of questioning that we have, so we're able to gather the proper amount of evidence to present to you. Because as soon as you call 911 and let us know, hey, a crime has committed, for us that case has already begun, it's already in trial, and we are trying to find the best way to make sure that we are able to not only charge that person, but get them the proper punishment and be able to fight against whatever defenses they have. Because when it comes to rape, there's a lot of defenses that get thrown out there. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But another thing, there's a lot of resources out there for rape victims. Texas itself has Texas Victim Compensation Act. They will cover all your fees. You won't have to pay anything for anything, but they will also send you to counselors. There are trained counselors that can get with you, talk to you about it, and try to get you to as close to normal as they can. Because as the American Psychology Journal has published, rape is one of those intensive crimes that you can possibly never get normal from. There's no recovery from it per se. So you may be recovered in a year, or you may never recover from it, but you will have those counselors that will be with you every step of the way to make sure that you are taken care of, that your mental health and your physical health is utmost and prepared, because ultimately that's what we're worried about.
Now let me just expand on that. We're talking about the officers. Most likely the officer that's going to come respond to the scene will be a patrol officer. Now it depends if you call the police from the location of where the crime scene occurred, or you may go to the hospital.
The hospital will call us.
Most likely the hospital, they have specialists, protocols, nurses that they specialize in handling sexual assault type of incidents or cases. The other thing I wanted to mention, well, like you briefly touched upon it, was that our officers, when they get there, they are already gathering evidence to get ready for trial. Okay, so they are going to ask you some questions that you may not feel comfortable with, and you may have to explain everything again. But unfortunately, that's the kind of statements we have to gather, because we have to prove consent. We have to look at the injuries.
Because let's just do an example of how HPD's process is. You have a patrol officer that's going to go to the hospital. They're going to do a detailed report about whatever you tell them, whatever you want to give them, and that report gets sent to an investigator. That investigator is going to read that report, but they're going to do their own investigation, which means those questions that that patrol officer asked are going to get asked again, and maybe in more detail. It's unfortunate, but you may have to relive that trauma again, and possibly again in trial, because what these criminals are trying to do is they're trying to get away from it. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to show, hey, you gave them consent. That's just, again, we're going back to consent. It's the baseline. That's what they're trying to show is, hey, you gave them consent. Very few criminals will go ahead and say, oh, no, it was about something else. But they will always go back to consent. The defense will try to say, hey, it was all about consent. She said yes today, but she didn't say yes today, but she had said yes a month ago. Same thing for, he didn't say yes today, but he had said yes a month ago. A month ago doesn't mean you consented them for the rest of your life.
Now, some of the other thing I want to talk about is the victims, they go through so much emotion for probably rest of their life. Because they may even relive this trauma over and over again. But some of those experiences that you will feel, but it depends on the person, is shock and numbness. The first thing is you're gonna go through different cycles. I can't believe this happened to me.
Yeah.
Why did this happen to me? You're gonna go through all these different ideas or
the
different
5
thoughts.
stages of grief, as psychologists call it, the 5 stages of grief are going to happen.
Yes.
It's going to happen at some point.
And you're also gonna feel guilt, shame, and you may start looking for reasons like blaming yourself. And once again, do not blame yourself.
Yeah.
Others, anger, isolation. A person may isolate himself or herself from the society, just want to be left alone. Nightmares, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
And some people actually may engage in risky behavior, start drinking alcohol just to get rid of the pain.
Yeah, because they're trying to numb in their mind, they're trying to numb that pain, and the more the alcohol or the more substance abuse they do, the more they think that they're going to get away from it, and that's just, it will destroy a life. Yeah. It will destroy a life.
So, so that's why this crime is, in my eyes, is very heinous, because you pretty much, that one crime, you destroy that person's life, and that person is going to have to live with that rest of her life, and this could be our relatives, our friends, our neighbors. And the strange thing is, this could have happened, and they never reported it, and we may never know about it.
Exactly. One out of 4 gets reported, so we need to know. Even if it's an attempt, we do need to know. Now, when it comes to reporting, there's a few questions that we've been asked, and we kind of went through them and tried to see which ones the ones that were more important. The number one, again, was, hey, the person tried, and they got away because I was able to fight them, or they remorse at the last second, or something happened and the person left. That doesn't mean you don't have to report it anymore. That it still took place. The attempt was still made. Please let us know, because because you may be the person that they stopped with, but another person may not have been so lucky.
So let me just recap. We talked a lot about sexual assaults, but now I'm going to slowly talk about sexual assault at campuses, how it's becoming not an issue, but it's how prevalent it is. And because we have one day our children's going to go to college, and this is a conversation we need to start having with our children. Now this includes the male and the female, because they're both likely to end up getting sexually assaulted. I remember one incident where this one female, she was sexually assaulted, and the police didn't do anything about it. And what she was doing was she took her bed to every class she went to make a point that I was sexually assaulted, and nobody did anything about it. So this is something I'm glad we are getting this out. Let the people know how widespread this problem is. Not in this is just in the U.S., but all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
One more thing I wanted to mention was I didn't mention earlier was, if you're traveling overseas, make sure you're very careful, because some of these rapists, they actually target tourists because they know that they're not going to come back even if it gets caught. To testify in court.
Exactly. They'll try to force that out there. They'll say, hey, that's their way of fighting the court is, hey, the victim's not going to come back, so I can do that. So another thing that now going back to the questions that we were talking about, another question that we had is, what if I know the person? Doesn't make a difference if you know the person. If a person sexually assaults you, and sexual assault can even happen in a marriage. A lot of people don't. This was actually very recent. Now that I speak about it, we actually had a very recent one where we had a female that claimed that her husband was raping her, and she was like, she blurted out, and then she was like, but you guys are not going to believe me because that doesn't happen, right? And the officer told her, no, that actually happens. It's very, very common. It happens. You have to report it. You need to let us know. Another question we had was, well, as we had just discussed, I gave the person consent about a month ago. That's an ex. I don't have consent with them anymore, but he can easily say I consented. That still doesn't matter. If you gave somebody consent a year ago, doesn't give them consent for the rest of your life. That still has to be done. Another important question that we had was, I have no physical injuries. What do I need proof? You don't have to have physical injuries. In fact, if anything, sexual assault usually will have more of a psychological impact on you than physical, because the human body heals from any injury that comes to it. To a certain extent, the healing kicks in. Physical, emotional, and psychological healing takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort, and as we mentioned, sex assaults are one of those things that even the psychologist journal says that it's very, very traumatic. So you don't need to have physical injuries.
The other one that the question brought up was that rape is committed on impulse and by a stranger, meaning the stranger sees a woman, okay, I'm going to attack her and rape her. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Most rapes are planned and often occur in one's home.
Yeah.
Many times the offender is a relative, friend, acquaintance, neighbor of the victim survivor, such as in the case of date rape.
Yeah.
So that's something, I mean, I want the viewers to have the mindset is that this is what our staff are telling us, where this is occurring, and most likely you are going to know the perpetrator.
Then, okay, then another question that we get is, we've talked about rape kit, and people in their mind are wondering, well, now I have a bill for a rape kit, what do I do?
Yeah.
By law, you don't have to pay for a rape kit. If you feel that you have been, if not feel, but if you know you've been sexually assaulted, if you feel you've been sexually assaulted, if there's an inkling, you can go to a hospital and request a rape kit. They are by law required to give you a rape kit. Depending if you want to do charges or not, if you don't feel like they want to report it at that time, they'll give you a special code. They'll give you a Jane Doe rape kit code, which you can later on bring if you feel a year down the road that you want to report it. Bring it down to us. We'll follow up on it using that code, because it's only linked to your case. And then another thing is, and I had this very recently in a robbery case where the victim was like, I'm too worried about going to the hospital, I have to pay the bills. Texas has the Texas Victim Compensation Act. It is more or less an entity that takes care of all the bills for a crime that a victim may incur. So it's very important to know you don't have to worry about the bills, you have to worry about yourself, because this is a life-altering incident that can take place at any given time. And it can affect not just you, but your family members, the people around you will get affected by it. Maybe not as much as you, but they will get affected. And you need to be able to fight back mentally, emotionally, and physically.
All right, Yusuf, we're almost out of time. I wish we had more time because I wanted to talk about some success stories, but unfortunately, we may have to do another episode in the future about sexual crimes. I think we have so much information we can talk about, but due to time constraint, we're not able to do that. But I just want to say to all the wonderful viewers, thank you for watching our episodes. Please give us some feedback on our Facebook, Odds TV Houston, so that way we can come up with different topics to talk about and educate all of you. Meanwhile, be safe out there, be vigilant, and also be aware of your surroundings. And if you ever have a question, call the police. And they'll be more than happy to help you. Yeah, absolutely. We're here. Please give us a chance. Like I say in every episode, please give us a chance to help you. The only way we can help you if you allow us. It doesn't matter what kind of crime it is, small or big. Call us, let us do our investigation, and let us follow up on it. That's our job. That's what we get paid for. That's what we do. That's what we love doing as police officers. And it's very important that we be given the opportunity to show you that we care about the community. We care about every single person that's in the community, and we want to make sure that no harm comes to you. Absolutely. Well said. Yeah. So that's the best way we can put it. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Have a nice day.
321 Central traffic stop.
21.
I'll be on East Green, right outside Henry County, 911 dispatch.
321 status.